Hello and welcome to this video on accessible ramps under the 2013 through the 2025 California Building Code. My name is Eric Melendez. I'm an ADA coordinator and CASp candidate with Martin Brothers Consulting Services. Before we begin, I'd just like to say that visuals and graphics in this presentation are taken from the Division of State Architects Access Compliance Advisory Reference Manual and from the Access Board's Guide to the ADA Standards. Links to the DSA reference manual and the Access Board guides will be provided in the description. More about Martin Brothers Consulting Services, you can visit us online at mbcserv.com. You can give us a call at 949-932-0366. We specialize in providing CRASCA compliant CASp reports. We are also housing experts. We've helped many clients develop new public housing facilities. We also provide accessibility and ADA consulting for businesses and organizations outside of California. We offer design and plan review for new construction and alteration projects anywhere in the country. We offer DSA project inspector services. We employ both Class 1 and Class 2 DSA inspectors. We also do playground safety evaluations involving surface impact testing and surface stability reporting under ASTM. So, this is quite a lecture. I've got about 42 slides total. So the short version is an accessible ramp must have the following. An accessible ramp must have running slopes less than 8.33%, have cross slopes less than 2%, must be 48 inches wide minimum, must have top landings 60 inches by 60 inches wide minimum, have bottom landings 72 inches in direction of travel, and be at least as wide as the ramp, must, if provided, provide change of direction landings that are 60 inches wide minimum by 72 inches wide minimum in the direction of downward travel from the upper ramp run. Ramps must have landings with cross slopes less than 2%. Ramps must have compliant handrails with extension and wheel guards, and must have a maximum rise of 30 inches per run. All right, so that's the short version. Let's get into the details. Actually, before we do that, we're going to define some key terms. The first major key term is an accessible route. An accessible route is a continuous, unobstructed path connecting accessible elements and spaces of an accessible site, building, or facility that can be negotiated by a person with a disability using a wheelchair, and that is also safe for and usable by persons with other disabilities. Interior accessible routes may include corridors, hallways, floors, ramps, elevators, and lifts. Exterior accessible routes may include parking, access aisles, curb ramps, crosswalks of vehicular ways, walks, ramps, and lifts. Also, these definitions come from the California Building Code, Division 2 definitions. These definitions are adopted by DSA, the Division of State Architect, who regulates access in California. Another key term, circulation path. An exterior or interior way of passage provided for pedestrian travel, including but not limited to walks, sidewalks, hallways, courtyards, elevators, platform lifts, ramps, stairways, and landings. A couple more. This is the last slide of key terms. Running slope. The slope that is parallel to the direction of travel. Cross slope. The slope that is perpendicular to the direction of travel. Next, this will only come up a little bit in this presentation, but detectable warnings. They are a standardized surface feature built in or applied to walking surfaces or other elements to warn persons with visual impairments of hazards on a circulation path. The hazard here is typically vehicular way. So whenever someone who is either blind or vision impaired, they sweep with their cane. If they have some sight, they'll see the bright yellow grid of domes, and they'll know to pause and observe to make sure traffic is clear. If they are fully without sight, their cane will sweep over the domes and they'll feel those bumps, and also they'll step on the surface, and you can feel that through your foot, and then that's when you know to stop and make sure it's safe to cross. All right, so those are the key terms. Everything else should hopefully be pretty self-explanatory. So let's start off with building our code path. So we start in Division 2, like always, with the California Building Code to find out what and how many. Now, I'm going to jump the shark a little bit by telling you that ramps are part of an accessible route. But if you didn't know that yet, this is the code path that you would have to take to discover that ramps are part of an accessible route. And you'll see in a later slide, we're going to find the code section that specifically states ramps are a component of an accessible route. If we want to know where a ramp is required, we have to look at the scoping section for accessible routes. That is section 11B 206, accessible routes. 206.1 general says accessible routes shall be provided in accordance with section 11B 206 and shall comply with division 4. 11B 206 covers scoping requirements for accessible routes, and division 4 covers the technical requirements for accessible routes. So we're going to stay in division 2 for a little bit. Where required, 11B 206.2. Accessible routes shall be provided where required by 11B 206.2. All right, let's keep reading. 11B 206.2.1, site arrival points. At least one accessible route shall be provided within the site from accessible parking spaces and accessible passenger drop-off and loading zones, public streets and sidewalks, and public transportation stops to the accessible building or facility entrance they serve. Where more than one route is provided, all routes must be accessible. We have some exceptions. Number 1 is reserved, not adopted by California. Number 2, an accessible route shall not be required between site arrival points and the building or facility entrance if the only means of access between them is a vehicular way not providing pedestrian access. Exception 3, general circulation paths shall be permitted when located in close proximity to an accessible route. Okay. This graphic is from the Access Board's guide to the ADA standards, and it basically just visualizes the information we got from the previous slide. It's showing the different site arrival points that are on a site and how we have to provide access from those site arrival points to the building entrances. Again, this is under the 2010 ADA standards, so the general idea is the same, but the specifics and the specific requirements differ between the ADA and the California Building Code. Continuing on with 11B 206.2.2, within a site. At least one accessible route shall connect accessible buildings, accessible facilities, accessible elements, and accessible spaces that are on the same site. We have an exception here, and it says an accessible route shall not be required between accessible buildings, accessible facilities, accessible elements, and accessible spaces if the only means of access between them is a vehicular way not providing pedestrian access. So a little bit more on access within a site. This is another graphic lifted from the Access Board, and this gives you a visual on a little campus here that has 3 buildings and a parking lot, and they have provided an accessible route between each building and from parking and to elements that are on the exterior of the site, such as a drinking fountain. You can pause and read all this. Again, this is from this covers the 2010 ADA standards, so the ideas are the same, but specifics might be different. Continuing on, so this is exterior. Let's look at an example of this on the interior of a building. And with this graphic, also from the Access Board, you can see in this yellow path here, we have access from the left of the image coming down a ramp. Then we have an accessible route to this doors maneuvering clearance. Continuing on, we have a drinking fountain and its clear floor space. The space in front of this drinking fountain is connected to our circulation path here, our accessible route. And it continues on going towards the right of the image, connecting to an elevator and the elevator's call buttons. So yeah, everything inside that is accessible and required to be accessible must be connected by an accessible route. All right, let's keep going. That was single story unit facilities. It's easy to understand that, but what happens when you have buildings with multiple floors? 11B 206.2.3 covers that scenario. 11B206.2.3, multi-story buildings and facilities. At least one accessible route shall connect each story and mezzanine in multiple story buildings and facilities. There are some exceptions here. They're kind of big. Exception 1. The following types of privately funded multi-story buildings do not require a ramp or elevator above and below the first floor. Exception 1.1 effectively says if you're a two-story office building, no vertical access is required unless you are the professional office of a healthcare provider. If you're a building with more than 3 stories, but each story is less than 3,000 square feet, you also don't need to provide vertical access. Exception 1.2 basically says if you're not on this list, you don't need vertical access. And that list is shopping center, shopping mall, or the professional office of a healthcare provider, or terminal, depot, or other station used for specified public transportation, or an airport passenger terminal, and that is less than 3 stories high or less than 3,000 square feet, yada, yada, yada. So long as a reasonable portion of all facilities and accommodations normally sought and used by the public in the building are accessible to and usable by persons with disabilities. You may want to read that on your own, in your own pace, to really understand what it says, but hopefully my quick summaries at the start there kind of explain it. Here's a visual also from the access board right there. This is the left image is showing a 2-story office building. It's under 3 stories tall, so per the previous code section 206.2.3, we don't need an elevator because we don't have a professional healthcare provider office upstairs. The right image is a 3-story building, but it's less than 3,000 square feet per story, so we don't need a elevator or a ramp, vertical access of some sort. We don't need it because in this scenario, this is just office space. It's not one of the elements covered under exception 1.2 from 206.2.3. All right, so let's move on. 11B 206.2.3 has some more exceptions. It goes all the way up to exception 7. Numbers 2 and 7 aren't adopted by the California Building Code. Number 3 and 6 are kind of specific and not common, and they're outside the scope of this video. 4 and 5 are great. Number 4 is for residential dwelling units, so unless you do housing, this isn't all too relevant for you. And if you do housing, go ahead and read that exception. It's great. Housing is it's its own beast, that's for sure. Exception 5 covers transient lodging. Transient lodging is for short-term stays, hotels, motels, hostels, things of that nature where people are typically not staying for more than a week at a time. Let's keep going. 11B 206.2.4, spaces and elements. At least one accessible route shall connect accessible building or facility entrances with all accessible spaces and elements within the building or facility, including mezzanines, which are otherwise connected by a circulation path unless exempted by section 11B 206.2.3, exceptions 1 through 7. Those are the ones we just read in the previous 2 slides. So this is basically saying that everything within your facility must be connected to an accessible route leading to the entrance, or which is connected to a route that leads to the entrance. There's some exceptions. Number 1 and 3 are not adopted by California. Number 2, in assembly areas with fixed seating required to comply with 11B 221, an accessible route shall not be required to serve fixed seating where wheelchair spaces required to be on an accessible route are not provided. Okay, so unless you're in an assembly area, not really relevant. Moving on to 206.2.5, which covers restaurants, cafeterias, banquet facilities, and bars. In those places, an accessible route shall be provided to all functional areas, including raised or sunken areas and outdoor areas. So if you have your outdoor dining area and an indoor dining area, we have to let guests choose whether or not they want to dine inside or outside. That's just what it says. We have 3 exceptions. Number one, alterations of buildings or facilities not required to provide an accessible route between stories, which we saw in some of the earlier slides. An accessible route shall not be required to a mezzanine dining area where the mezzanine contains less than 25% of the total combined area for seating and dining, and where the same decor and services are provided in the accessible area. So this is basically saying if you were otherwise exempted by the requirement for vertical access, but you've got this mezzanine dining area, that's upstairs, and that's where you host special events. That's not going to fly. You should probably move those events downstairs, or you need to build an elevator or a lift or something to give access to that mezzanine, because special things are happening up there that are not offered downstairs. Exception 3. Sports facilities, tiered dining areas providing seating required to comply with 11B221 shall be required to have accessible routes serving at least 25% of the dining area, provided that accessible routes serving seating complying with 11B221 and each tier is provided with the same services. So it's kind of a dispersal thing, kind of, sort of. Okay, let's go. That was scoping. So we have learned where we need an accessible route and what we can have on our accessible route. In this video, we're specifically focusing on ramps. So now we know you need a route from your public way or other facility entrance points to your entrance, and then from your entrance to anything inside your site that is required to be accessible. We need a route to it. Where are we putting these ramps? And now we're going to look at what are the actual requirements of the ramp. What are the technical requirements, the dimensions, the slopes, things like that. So 11B401 general starts with scoping. It has its own little scoping section. 11B401.1 scope. The provisions of Division 4 shall apply where required by Division 2 or where referenced by a requirement in this chapter. 11B402 accessible routes continues with 11B402.1 general, which says accessible routes shall comply with 11B402. Okay, so let's keep it going. Okay, components. 11B402.2 accessible routes shall consist of one or more following components. This is kind of what I was talking about at the start of Division 4 here. Walking surfaces with a running slope not steeper than 1 to 20, that's 5%. Doorways, ramps, curb ramps excluding the flared sides, elevators, and platform lifts. All components of an accessible route shall comply with the applicable requirements of Division 4. So, ramps are explicitly listed in 402.2 components, which means a ramp is part of an accessible route. There we go. This section is very important. So let's keep going. So we're going to look at now what do ramps need. 11B 405.1 general ramps on accessible routes shall comply with 11B 405. There's an exception. In assembly areas, aisle ramps adjacent to seating and not serving elements required to be an accessible route shall not be required to comply with 11B 405. Aisle ramps can be pretty cramped. Slope. 11B 405.2 ramp runs shall have a running slope not steeper than 1 to 12. That is 8.33%. There's an exception here, but it's not adopted by California. I believe the ADA does adopt it, but whatever it says, California does not care about. 11B 405.3 cross slope. Cross slopes of ramp runs shall not be steeper than 148, which is 2%. Floor ground surfaces, that's 11B 405.4. Floor or ground surfaces of ramp runs shall comply with section 11B 302. Changes in level other than the running slope and cross slope are not permitted on ramp runs. The floor and ground surface requirement is basically saying your floor or ground surface has to be firm, stable, and slip resistant. You don't want people to slip, trip, or otherwise have a tumble on your ramp. Continuing, 11B405.5, clear width. The clear width of a ramp run shall be 48 inches minimum. I like to measure clear width between the handrails, but there's an exception. It's exception 2. You got to watch out for it because it allows projections into the curb ramp, or into the ramp. Sorry, not a curb ramp. They're different. Allows projections into the ramp width by the handrails. We'll get there. But exception 1 says within employee work areas, the required clear width of ramps that are a part of common use circulation paths shall be permitted to be decreased by work area equipment, provided that the decrease is essential to the function of the work being performed. Keyword being essential. It has to be real. You can't just declare it's essential with the ulterior motive of being that I want to obstruct this ramp width, Okay, here's exception 2 that I was talking about. Handrails may project into the required clear width of the ramp at each side, 3.5 inches maximum at the handrail height. So those are the only things that can project into the ramp width. Exception 3. The clear width of ramps in residential uses serving an occupant load of 50 or less shall be 36 inches minimum between handrails. So because this is a low occupant load and it's residential, there's not a lot of people coming in and out of here typically. California is allowing a narrower ramp. All right, let's keep going. 11B405.6, rise. The rise for any ramp run shall be 30 inches maximum. On the right-hand side of this slide here, I have an image, again, from the access board, which can hopefully help you visualize the last few slides of requirements for ramps all put together. Please note that this graphic, again, it's from the access board. It's from the 2010 ADA standards, and not everything in that graphic is compliant to California code, specifically the sections for the clear width, the ramp clear width, the handrails, and the requirement for alterations. Those don't apply or agree with the current California building code. All right, let's keep going. 11B 405.7, landings. Ramps shall have landings at the bottom and top of each ramp run. Landings shall comply with 11B 405.7. 11B 405.7.1, slope. Landings shall comply with section 11B 302. Changes in level, slopes exceeding 148, and detectable warnings shall not be permitted. I would like to emphasize here that detectable warnings are not permitted in a ramp landing. They may be provided outside of the landing, but we really want to avoid the situation where a ramp dumps you out into the vehicular way where you would need those detectable warnings, because that's hazardous. Ideally, there would be some form of physical separation, either a wall, another bit of sidewalk, something in between the ramp landing, grandma coming down on her wheelchair, and the road. Yeah, so let's keep it going. Before we move too far into this slide, let's acknowledge that there are 3 types of landings on a ramp. Top landings, intermediate landings, and bottom landings. The top landing is at the top. When you enter the ramp from the top landing, you are going down a negative grade. The intermediate landing is a flat spot along a ramp run where one can catch their breath. The bottom landing is at the bottom. When you enter the ramp from the bottom landing, you are going up a positive grade. All right, got that clear? 11B 405.7.2, width. The landing clear width shall be at least as wide as the widest ramp run leading to the landing. 405.7.2.1 says top landing shall be 60 inches wide minimum. So we have the width requirement, but at top landings, we got to have 60 inches wide. 11B 405.7.3, length. The landing clear length shall be 60 inches long minimum. So you'll see that in intermediate landings, the ones where you could stop along the ramp run and catch your breath. But 405.7.3.1, bottom landings shall extend 72 inches minimum in the direction of ramp run. So when you're coming down from the ramp run, we want to provide a little bit longer, flat, less than 2% sloped area where you can get your bearings, 11B 405.7.4, change in direction landings. This is the one that I didn't talk about. Change in direction landing. Ramps that change directions between runs at landing shall have a clear landing 60 inches minimum by 72 inches minimum in the direction of downward travel from the upper ramp. Change in direction landing. You'll get a visual of that on this next slide right here. Change in direction landing is depicted in figure B. You can see from the ramp run in the direction of travel, there's 72 inches depth and it's 60 inches wide. The 72 inches depth, like I said, is to give you time to, hit the brakes, collect yourself. The 60-inch width is so that you can spin your chair around and turn in the other direction. The same goes for figure C, the top landing, 60 by 60. That gives someone in a wheelchair the ability to spin around and change directions. Figure A is the straight portion of the ramp. You can see there's a section here that has a defined length of 60 inches minimum. That is the intermediate landing where you can collect your breath along the ramp run. It's as wide as the ramp, but it's 60 inches long and it's less than 2% sloped. Also in figure A, you have the bottom landing, which is 72 inches long, 72 inches long, so you can collect yourself, and as wide as the ramp run. So hopefully this can help you visualize what those last couple of ramp slides talking about landings were. All right, let's keep going. 405.7.5, doorways. Where doorways are located adjacent to a ramp landing, maneuvering clearances required by 11B 404.2.4 and 404.3.2 shall be permitted to overlap the required landing area. Doors, when fully open, shall not reduce the required ramp landing width by more than 3 inches. Doors in any position shall not reduce the minimum dimension of the ramp landing to less than 42 inches. So with this section, we know doors are allowed to open onto ramp landings and the clear floor space is allowed to overlap, but there are restrictions that we have to watch out for. If you can design it so your ramp landings have no doors in them, that would be preferable. All right. Handrail requirements, 11B 405.8. Ramp runs shall have handrails complying with section 11B 505. There are some exceptions. 1 and 2 are not adopted by California. Number 3 says curb ramps do not require handrails. Thankfully, because otherwise you'd have handrails in parking lots everywhere. Cars would hit them and you'd have jagged metal sticking out at you all the time. Number 4, at door landings, handrails are not required on ramp runs less than 6 inches in rise or 72 inches in length. So micro ramp runs at doors don't need handrails. This section referenced 505, 11B 505. It's a different division, Division 5. We will stay here in Division 4, and then we'll come back to 11B 505. All right, 405.9, edge protection. Edge protection complying with section 11B 405.9.2 shall be provided on each side of ramp runs and at each side of ramp landings. We have some exceptions. We've got 3 of them. Edge protection shall not be required on ramps that are not required to have handrails and have sides complying with 11B 406.2.2. Number 2, edge protection shall not be required on the sides of ramp landings serving an adjoining ramp or stairway. Number 3, edge protection shall not be required on the sides of ramp landings having a vertical drop-off of ½ inch maximum within 10 inches horizontally, the minimum landing area specified in section 11B 405.7. Now note that exceptions 2 and 3 specifically say ramp landings, not ramp runs. And along ramp runs, we have to have a curb or barrier. This is a form of the edge protection. 11B 405.9.2, curb or barrier. A curb or barrier shall be provided that prevents the passage of a 4-inch diameter sphere where any portion of the sphere is within 4 inches of the finished floor or ground surface. To prevent wheel entrapment, the curb or barrier shall provide a continuous and uninterrupted barrier along the length of the ramp. We really want to avoid Grandma in her wheelchair getting one of her wheels stuck on the vertical portion of that handrail, coming to a dead stop and then her momentum flinging her out of the wheelchair onto the ramp. Yeah. So put that wheel guide in. It'll save a lot of hurt. 11B, 405.10, wet conditions. Landing subject to wet conditions shall be designed to prevent the accumulation of water. So if that's a concern, so if this ramp is outside and it there's a risk that water may pool there, one, I would recommend you re-pour the concrete so that water drains effectively off the sides. Or if you must, put a drain in and make sure the drain cover has very narrow openings so that we can't get a wheel stuck in it or someone's cane stuck in it. All right, moving on. Okay, so we're done with Division 4. Those were all the stuff relevant to ramps in Division 4. So let's go pick up Division 5. 11B, 505 handrails, continues with 11B 505.1 general. Handrails provided along walking surfaces, complying with Section 11B 403. Required at ramps, complying with Section 11B 405. And required at stairs, complying with 11B 504, shall comply with Section 505. Where handrails are required, they comply with this section. So we're only going to be focusing on ramps. 11B 505.2, where required, handrails shall be provided on both sides of stairs and ramps. There's some exceptions. Assembly areas, handrails shall not be required on both sides of aisle ramps. We know that already. We kind of heard that earlier. Number 2, curb ramps do not require handrails. We knew that already. Number 3, at door landings, we knew that already. All right, keep it going. 505.3, continuity. Handrails shall be continuous with the full length of each stair flight or ramp run. Inside handrails on switchback or dog-lay stairs and ramps shall be continuous between flights or runs. There's an exception. In assembly areas, ramp handrails adjacent to seating or within aisle width shall not be required to be continuous in aisles serving seating. 11B 505.4, height. Top of gripping surfaces of handrails shall be 34 inches minimum and 38 inches maximum vertically above walking surfaces, stair nosings, and ramp surfaces. Handrails shall be at a consistent height above walking surfaces, stair nosings, and ramp surfaces. I would just like to note there's an asterisk after consistent height here. The term consistent height, when it comes to ramp and stair handrails, is not really something that is defined in the code. Nowhere in the building code, even outside of Chapter 11B, does it say at one step your handrail can't be at 34 inches high, and at the next step it can't be at 38. Now, practically speaking, having a wavy handrail like that is not okay, but there's nothing solid in the code that you can point to and say, hey, that's a violation. So it's really up to the discretion of a CASp or building official when they want to call out a handrail as being too inconsistent in height. We typically, if it's around 1 inch different between the bottom tread and the top tread, we're going to spot check it in the middle. But if it's within an inch or so, we're not really worried about it. All right, moving on. 11B 505.5, clearance. Clearance between handrail gripping surfaces and adjacent surfaces shall be 1.5 inches minimum. Handrails may be located in a recess if the recess is 3 inches maximum deep and 18 inches minimum clear above the top of the handrail. All right. 11B 505.6, gripping surface. Handrail gripping surfaces shall be continuous along their length and shall not be obstructed along their tops or sides. The bottoms of handrail gripping surfaces shall not be obstructed from more than 20% of their length. Where provided, horizontal projections shall occur 1.5 inches minimum below the bottom of the handrail gripping surface. The intent here is to ensure that someone using the handrail can get a good grip on it and to make sure that they don't have to take their hand off the handrail, move their hand up a little bit, and grip the handrail again. We want to make sure that we can have a nice, consistent point of contact. There are some exceptions. Number 1, where handrails are provided along walking surfaces with slopes not steeper than 1 to 20, the bottoms of handrail gripping surfaces shall be permitted to be obstructed along their entire length where they are integral to crash rails or bumper guards. 1 to 20, I believe, is 5%. 1 to 20, yep, 5%. Number 2, the distance between horizontal projections and the bottom of the gripping surfaces shall be permitted to be reduced by 1/8 inch for each half inch of additional handrail perimeter dimension that exceeds 4 inches. All right. Handrail cross sections. 11B 505.7. Handrail gripping surfaces shall have a cross section complying with 11B 505.7.1 or 505.7.2. We can have either circular or non-circular cross sections. 505.7.1 is for the circular cross sections. Handrail gripping surfaces with a circular cross section shall have an outside diameter of 1 1/4 inches minimum and 2 inches maximum. For non-circular cross sections, 11B 505.7.2, handrail gripping surfaces with a non-circular cross section shall have a perimeter dimension of 4 inches minimum and 6 1/4 inches maximum, and a cross section dimension of 2 1/4 inches maximum. Coming up here is a visual on non-circular cross sections. You can see figure A, it's a squircle, it's a square circle, it's a square with rounded edges, and figure B is an oval shaped handrail. All right, continuing on. 11B 505.8 surfaces. Handrail gripping surfaces and any surfaces adjacent to them shall be free of sharp or abrasive elements and shall have rounded edges. That's why in 505.7.2, figure A is a squircle and not a square, because we can't have sharp edges. They have to be rounded. 11B 505.9 fittings. Handrails shall not rotate within their fittings. So your handrail can't free spin within, a bearing or anything like that. It's got to be solid and immovable. Handrail extensions, 11B 505.10. Handrail gripping surfaces shall extend beyond and in the same direction of stair flights and ramp runs in accordance with section 11B 505.10. We have some exceptions. We got 3 of them. Number 1, extensions shall not be required for continuous handrails at the inside turn of a switchback or dogleg stairs and ramps. So the inside run doesn't need an extension, but the outside does. The inside is like it says, the switchback or dogleg, that part of the handrail that just kind of folds back on itself, that's the inside. The outside is the one that has a break or just has to go all the way around the outside perimeter. Number 2, in assembly areas, extensions shall not be required for ramp handrails in aisles serving seating where the handrails are discontinuous to provide access to seating and to permit crossovers within aisles. People have to move. They can't move if there's handrails in the way. Number 3, in alterations where the extension of the handrail in the direction of a stair flight or ramp run would create a hazard, the extension of the handrail may be turned at 90 degrees from the direction of stair flight or ramp run. But we'll see a little bit in the next slide. We can make handrail extensions that kind of turn back on themselves and make a P shape. And as long as the bottom of that return is at 27 inches maximum, so it can be lower than that, but as long as it's at that 27, it's considered cane detectable by someone using a cane, sweeping to make sure everything's clear, because their cane will hit that and they'll know that they can avoid that projection. 11B 505.10.1, top and bottom extensions at ramps. Ramp handrails shall extend horizontally above the landing for 12 inches minimum beyond the top and bottom of ramp runs. Extensions shall return to a wall, guard, or the landing surface, or shall be continuous to the handrail of adjacent ramp run. And you can see in this figure that P shape that I was talking about, that bottom return, the bottom of that P, as long as that's at that 27 or lower, it's cane detectable and it's not really a projection hazard. So you could try to leverage that exception in the previous slide, 505.10, exception 3, but if the argument could be made that all you have to do is simply weld that little bit of pipe underneath your extension and it's no longer a hazard, you should probably do that. Alrighty, that's it. Now you know everything there is to know about ramps. So thank you for watching, and I've made this little quiz. A restaurant owner has been made aware that their lower dining level is not on an accessible route. The only access to the dining area is via stairs. Special events are held on this lower level. The restaurant believes it can't afford to renovate the dining area to provide one of the following. Which option should they take? Option A, install a chairlift to the lower dining area. Option B, install a ramp to the lower dining area. Option C, provide an accessible event space somewhere else in the restaurant. Or option D, provide an observation area where guests can view the event from above. I'll give you a little bit of time to think about that. You can also just pause the video now. Got an answer yet? All right, well, I believe the best answer to the question that I invented here would be B, to install a ramp to the lower dining area. You could do option A, but the problem with chairlifts is they can be expensive. I don't know if they're as expensive as, putting a ramp in, but they also require maintenance, and they can be quite loud whenever someone goes to operate them. And, if you're in a restaurant, maybe we are considering the ambient volume of the room, and having a hydraulic chairlift going in the background may kind of disrupt that. A ramp requires no electricity. It requires no maintenance, usually, maybe aside from cleaning. And it just works. It always works. And it can be used by everyone. Let's say there's a bar down in that lower area and we have to roll some kegs down to that bar area. Having a ramp would be a whole lot easier than having stairs, or being restricted to the chairlift, which you are not supposed to move cargo with. And I would consider keg cargo. C and D just really are missing the mark. C, you can maybe make the argument, but do we really want to have segregated event spaces? No. And is the accessible event space really on up to the same level that the main event space is? Probably not. That's why I wouldn't pick C. And option D, provide an observation area where guests can view the event. There's basically no real participation there. And if it's in the budget to put a ramp in, that's just the way to go. All right, thank you for watching. I have been Eric with Martin Brothers Consulting Services. If you have any projects that need access specialists, give us a call or visit our website. Thank you.